Did you know there was this I listened to like 3 podcasts, so I don't know which one it was, but they spoke about, maybe one of you guys did this, but they spoke about like this napalm, the first time that napalm was invented at Harvard, which Harvard acts like they didn't invent napalm, even though they fully did, and they were trying to come up. They were like, well, what could we do to Japan to get them real good? And someone was like, the houses are made of paper. Why don't we burn it? And like one bombing mission, when they invented napalm, they like dropped napalm all over cities that killed like 500,000 just people because all their houses just burnt. Everything burnt. The whole fucking thing was just razed. And we don't talk about it because like a month later, they got double nuked.
Yeah.
So no one thinks about that. I feel like I'd rather get nuked than be napalmed in my paper home.
You see,
am I wrong?
You say that. Well,
Agreed.
The thing is, where are you in relation to ground zero?
It's on I get crushed by the bomb. It falls and that kills me. The metal falls on my head before it even explodes.
They aimed for that.
There's time for my family to be like, fuck! And then it explodes.
Have you ever seen that Japanese like animation of everyone in like slow motion being melted by the bomb and their like eyes are exploding and stuff and the children are screaming? It's pretty heavy metal. But you're absolutely right about the firebombing, and not only what they did in Japan, but you know, in Europe and I think Dresden, they have like a day every year in Germany where they fucking have like a Dresden Remembrance Day and shit on the Allies. They firebombed all those cities.
I'm not sure how deadly nukes really are. This sounds crazy to say, right? Like they're the most deadly thing mankind's ever created, which might be true. But they kind of act like, okay, when I was a teenager or even a younger kid than that, like in the 80s, there were these shows on like The Day After Tomorrow that just showed like all of America. Everything living was gone. All the trees, everything, the entire country leveled to the ground. No, it was a nuclear attack. Yeah, from the Russians. And people would stay underground. People who had like bunkers and could hide for a while would not be sure if they could come above ground or not. And they just made these things sound so horrific and the bombs so powerful and the aftermath. So, you know how many people died at Chernobyl?
What does Chernobyl have to do with anything?
It's a nuclear power plant that blew up, and it also has
the blowing up part didn't matter about anything though. The explosion was just like a pressure pop.
I feel like it kind of like it fell apart.
They had to put out.
It fell apart more than it blew
31
up.
31 people died from that. How many people died from Hiroshima? Like in the
31 people.
I think it's a really low number. Zach says it's much bigger. That's the napalm that killed.
And that's also like what the Soviet Union was reporting as far as deaths. Like all those towns and shit that got fucked up. Like
I think the Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the death toll is like a couple 100,000 total. But you've also got to take into effect with Chernobyl in particular, the increased cancer rates across all of Europe there. That's a whole different than a nuclear detonation, right? That was a nuclear fire just spewing radiation.
I wonder how those cancer rates compare to New Jersey.
I would say I bet they win over there downwind from Chernobyl.
We're no lightweights in Jersey. My whole family's had cancer.
Hey, someone they're like, I don't even have cancer and I live in Chernobyl. They have but
you know when you're talking about nuclear
and they're a stump.
And especially when those films were made depicting nuclear war. Right now, I think the U.S. and the Russians have like 4,500 nukes each, roughly, like 4,500 warheads each. But they've cut way down. Back in the 70s or whatever, I don't remember when they hit their peak, 70s or 80s probably. It was more than that, a lot more. Maybe 10,000 each, maybe 15,000 each.
The number's giant.
It was absurd. And so if they did that, and they all have trajectories mapped, it's not like there'd be a part where they're like, where should we send this one, Isaac? Like there's a big button and they all just launch. If they'd done that, then I think that we go into like a nuclear winter where it changes the weather of the planet. And then there's so much dust kicked up that's irradiated that all the dust is just making this big rotation around the planet with the kicked up irradiated.
Do you really
heavy
think that happens if we launch these missiles? That there's
a website. There's a website that you can select the nukes. and then like drop it where you live or wherever, and then see what would happen. And you could choose all these nukes, and everyone likes to use like the Fat Boy or whatever, like the big one. But apparently, there's like none of those. There's like very few of those. And the nukes that are actually like a lot that we talk about are I don't want to be like tactical nukes, but like they are not meant to pulverize the entire USA in one nuke.
There are thousands of city-killing size nuclear weapons.
We can lose a couple cities though. We still good.
Not a couple cities.
Bro, you lost. You live in the USA. There's a couple cities lost right now. Already.
You can Google like simulations of what would happen if, like, especially during the Soviet era, if both sides had launched their missiles. It's a global catastrophe. It's not like
people in Flint, Michigan wouldn't even be able to drink water after these nukes.
I don't think they'd be able to see the sun.
You know, like I think when I think about nukes, I think about the craziest, like with nukes, and I feel like the feel like I'll get shit like at the dinner table for this one, but I feel like Israel with nukes is wild.
Israel's had nukes for a long time.
Yeah,
but that's what's wild though.
Yeah,
that's like if you think about like a person who's been through it before, and like that's the person that'll use a nuke. Like that's the person that's like, you know, shows up the next day with the gun, and it's like, whoa, bro, we were just joking, and it's like, no, you weren't. I know how this shit goes.
Dude, I see nukes the exact same way as guns. I love seeing every country with nukes. I think that the world will be safer if we encourage nuke ownership.
It works.
If everyone has a nuke, nobody has a nuke.
If everyone has a nuke, no one has it. 100%. You don't think Trinidad and Tobago deserve a few dozen?
Both?
You know what?
Both of them? Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, it's the same country. So
Taylor for emperor.
Exactly. Yeah. Everyone should get a nuke. Personal nuke.
No, I just feel like if they were just like, we had a meeting and we decided we're gonna bring the Holocaust back. I know you guys probably aren't down, but they would just be like, okay, take it out turn the two keys, let's fucking blow ourselves up. Let's take out the whole Middle East is just gonna be, the whole country will be fucking.
They're gonna bring it all down, like Samson.
Yeah, whole suicide. They would do that shit. They'd be like, no, we're doing it to every. You can't. Yeah, no, I was just thinking about like the extreme measures, pretty extreme of USA to drop 2 nukes back to back.
It's really cocky.
I'm a huge fan of Metal Gear Solid, and I just like being in Japan. Like I just saw that like Hideo gets a lot of hate there in some ways because people are like, why would you love the USA? And a lot of his art is like American military based, like special tactics. And they're like, how could you be so obsessed with something that literally nuked us twice? And I'm always like, oh, that is an interesting dynamic. Yeah. Even though his whole angle is about war and how like what war is. And I'm like, kind of makes sense that he would be obsessed with it to an extent. I can understand it, you know? Mm-hmm. But some people react differently. They're like, bro, if I got nuked by that country, I would never sit there doing art about it or telling stories or making characters that are like American. And even though the whole thing is about disarming nukes, it's still, you know, it is like a fascinating thing to think about that it's like, you know, your recent history, your recent country history is.
Well, we like wouldn't let them have a military for a while, like do shit.
And what's crazy is that they thrive. Japan thrives. Japan is like if it's a game of Civ, Japan is doing pretty well on their way to a cultural victory. You got like fucking every American kid in high school, like there's like 40% of them are dressed like fucking Japanese cats. Or like, so like weebs are very common.
Yeah,
like they're very, very common.
Yeah, I like that about the cultural victory of Japan. They like, you can't keep them down. You nuke them twice, they're fucking making perverted vending machines. You tell them they can't have a military, they don't give a fuck. They're going to draw stuff that will upset you more than any gun pointed in your face ever could. Japan cannot be stopped. I think we should all take a lesson from Japan. And their food's great. I like
I think
everything
also
looks clean.
listen. I think I think about like Koreans. Like I grew up, went to like high school at the end of the 90s, mostly like early 2000s. And it was not an easy place for an Asian guy to pick up a girl.